So welcome, everyone. This is our Careers in Campaigning panel. It's part of our internship class. So many of the students here are part of our internship class. We've got some students in the room and we've got some students on Zoom. And then we also, this was opened up. So I think we have a couple of students not in the class that are just here for the panel as well. So what we'll do, we actually ended up with 4 speakers. It's the middle of the campaign season. I don't know why I thought this was a good time to do this panel, but even some of the people who are busy campaigning were able to join us. So we've got people who, alums, UAlbany and Rockefeller alums who have been involved either currently or previously in campaigns in a variety of different capacities and campaigns at different levels. So what I thought we'd do is we'll start with some introductions. I'll have each of them introduce themselves, just tell us a little bit about obviously their name, when they went to UAlbany, maybe what they majored in when they were here, and then which campaigns they've worked on, either currently or previously, and in what capacity. And just tell us whether you consider this a career or this is just something you did for a while. And we'll get started with that. And then I've got a few other questions to get us going. And then hopefully the students will have some questions as we get going as well. So Jake, I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot to start. Introduce yourself first, if you don't mind.
That sounds good. So I am Jake Crawford. I'm currently the chair of the Albany County Democratic Party here in Albany County, where UAlbany is. I graduated UAlbany 08 undergrad in American politics and 09 with a master's in public administration. This is not my full-time job or day job. This is actually my hobby, as we, as political party chairs, don't get paid a single penny to do what we do every year. I'm entering into my 5th year, I think, as chair of the party. So looking forward to it, but I've worked on congressional, state Senate campaigns, local town races, all the way down to school board races. So looking forward to any questions you have.
Excellent. Molly, let me add you to the spotlight.
Hello, my name is Molly Donnellan. I graduated from UAlbany in May of 2022. I did the semester in Washington program in spring of 2021. Right now, I am Zooming in from Las Vegas. I'm working on Senator Jackie Rosen's campaign. I've done quite a few campaigns at this point. Last cycle, I was in Texas working for Beto O'Rourke. While I was in DC, I was interning on Jennifer Carroll Foy's gubernatorial race in Virginia. I've done a couple House races and 1 county executive race on Long Island. So I would definitely consider campaigning a career. It is my career, but it can also be just something that you do for 1 cycle to get you into the door for official side work or just as a hobby. So it's a hobby, it's a career, it's also a lifestyle. So happy to talk about it.
Excellent. And Tanner, let's have you join the group. Oh, I didn't mean to do that, but that's okay.
Tanner McCracken, graduated UAlbany in 2021. Like Molly, same cohort too. I did the semester in Washington program as well. Since graduating UAlbany, I've been pursuing a master's in public administration. I've been doing that part-time, so just 1 course a semester. This will be my last semester, which it's been unreal. But during that, I've been full-time working for the Senate Republican leader of the state of New York, Rob Ort. I've been doing that for 3 years, started on his communications team, moved up to his senior staff circle. And by extension, prior to that, and in volunteer time, I've worked on several campaigns, mainly focused on the state Senate, but I've also been involved in local races. And I was, I guess you want to call the sole campaign chief of my campaign when I ran for the school board of the Mayapack School Board in Putnam County. I ran in 2020 when I was only 20 years old, became the youngest ever elected in my town, and my re-election was last year. So whether it's for me or for others, I've had several campaign experiences.
Excellent. And Joe. And if you
Hello, everyone. I apologize. I'm not on video. I'm in Los Angeles, California at the moment. Joe Bonilla, managing partner for Relentless, class of 2011. Also co-founder of the Dove Street Group, a boutique political consulting firm. Probably say over the last 20 years, have probably worked every form of a campaign, going from library board, school board, Common Council, town boards, state senate, state assembly, and certainly when we get to the federal levels as well. Primarily on a communication standpoint, so developing a candidate's public image, developing the platform for them, their strategy, and handling all their PR, and then certainly all the media buying that goes into a campaign. So looking forward to everybody's questions and also the rest of the panels.
Excellent. Why don't we start off by having you share, and maybe we'll go in the same order again this time. We'll mix it up later, but share a little bit about what you like most about working on a campaign or being involved with campaigning, and kind of tell us a little bit more in depth about the role you've played on various campaigns in terms of, because we've got people who are coming at it from very different perspectives. So Jake, go ahead.
So yeah, it's been a different perspective, both as a candidate myself, as well as, for the most part, political party chairs, as well as political parties. It's more about candidate recruitment. And then once you're finding candidates, trying to fill spots, reviewing candidates that you think are best going to represent whether it's certain positions in electoral politics or certain ideologies for the party. So it's mostly been on that end of it in terms of tracking down candidates, trying to convince them to run, as well as assisting with fundraising and trying to get folks in for field work. So it's more on a coordination side.
All right. And what's your favorite part about that?
Meeting new candidates, actually. The candidate interview process is probably the most fun. So the more opportunities you get to meet new people and see what they're interested in running for, or what their passion is, or what drives them to want to run for office, that's definitely my favorite part.
All right. Excellent. Molly, go ahead.
Hey, so I am a political fundraiser. I only work in the fundraising space, really. So I've been a call time manager for 2 cycles in a row now. So I help the senator identify donors to call and ask for money, and I coach her on her pitch. So that's really exciting. I'd say probably my favorite part about campaigning for my position is I get to have like a close relationship with my candidate, being in the call time room, and the travel. I mean, I really wouldn't travel as much as I do if it weren't for my job. So I'm here in Vegas now, but I've also done national travel with candidates and got to be in Texas last cycle. And just getting out there in the field and being able to talk to people is really helpful for me, because I am such a political junkie and I'm always watching like podcasts and news, and I'm on Twitter looking at my phone about politics, looking at polling all the time. But doing that really like puts you in a bubble. And I think that's part of the problem really with people who are super invested in politics, only consuming it through a screen. It really can lead to a lot of the polarization we're seeing. The algorithms are just telling you everything that you already agree with. So being able to go out there and actually talk to real people, see how they feel, especially now. In the past, I've worked for Democrats like along the ideological spectrum. I'd say in Texas, I was working for a pretty progressive candidate. Now I work for a pretty centrist and bipartisan candidate. So I think it gives me like a better perspective on what most of the country thinks about politics. And that's been really good, just to be like more well-rounded as an operative and learning how to speak to people in a way that actually resonates with them, even if it's a little bit more moderate than my own beliefs.
Excellent. Thank you. Tanner.
If I find myself helping on a campaign, it's mostly been on the communications and press side. I find it quite interesting now, back to back, we've all had different roles. I think that's going to be really insightful for your students, Joan. But on the communications and press side, it's really important with every campaign to have a message, and a message that really reflects both ideals and politics, and also what you're going to do if you achieve that elected office. But I also find what's really fun about that is once you're surfing the news cycle, because so much of what the news cycle during a campaign is happening also dictates what issues the voters expect you to answer for. So that's really fun. And I think, and this is important for a lot of people, especially if you plan on running for office or helping with a campaign, I always feel that a candidate should be also telling a story about themselves, and that how that connects with voters. I'm really focused on New York State. That's where I've been. It's cool that Molly's been traveling. I stay at home. But in New York, there's kind of this there's a story to tell here about what a New Yorker is and what we can achieve here. So I've always found that's cool. In the communication side of a campaign, you can connect the current issues with kind of the story of a campaign. And that's been really exciting. But besides being a comms or press guy, early on, I was a volunteer knocking on doors, phone banking. So there's really a lot of low-level positions that are also really fun when you get your foot in the door, because if you do, that is when you're really talking to people. And there's this energy in the air. Like when fall comes around, fall is fun for like pumpkin spice lattes and pumpkins. But if you're a political staffer and that weather comes in, you know it's time to be crushing doors and meeting people. And you really wouldn't meet these people if you weren't working on a campaign. And that is so exciting. I have met people from all backgrounds, all fields of thought, and it is just some of the most fulfilling things ever. Now, there's times where you're knocking a door and you're told to go pound sand, and that really stinks. But let's say you knock on 10 doors and 9 of them stink. You meet one person, maybe they change your mind or you change theirs, and you just drive home that day thinking, wow, like you're thinking about that one person you met and you connected through all the noise that Molly was talking about, all the partisan politics. You connected with the voter and they're going to go to the ballot box and you left an impact on them. So that is probably the most exciting part of that side of it, and the communications press side of campaigns.
Excellent. Joe, go ahead.
So I would probably say, the most exciting part of the gig, and like I said, I do this professionally, and then certainly work with candidates all across the country. It's really helping to hone in their message and their story. For a lot of times, they're first-time candidates. It's really seeing them build up to the point where they're ready to announce they're going to seek whatever office it could be, whether that's for mayor, it's for county executive, it's for assembly, it's for Senate, working with their family and also guiding them in the process of look, your life's now going to be in the full spotlight, and seeing them embrace that they could be the change in their community that they seek, whether it's at the local level, state level, whatever level it is, and really helping them shape that message, that story, and all the platform for them to be able to evoke why they believe they should get elected into office. And so that's always been the most rewarding aspect of it. That's why I like doing that part of it, because at the end of the day, like I consider myself a storyteller, right? And I think that's really where, what my talents and what I'm able to do help shape, these candidates, or whether it's an issue-based campaign as well, to be able to move forward in whatever direction to get, past the finish line there.
Excellent. Thank you. So hopefully this has been sparking some questions for all of you. So if any of the students have questions, if you're in the room, just raise your hand. I'll have you come up and ask the question. If you are on Zoom, you can type it into the chat or do the raise your hand feature and we'll have you unmute and ask your question. So I have more questions, but I want to get to your questions. So I'll save mine. If you have any questions, we'll dive into those first. So Akira, go ahead.
My first question would be, how did you guys get into campaigning? Like, what is the process? If that's something like we're interested in.
Excellent. Whoever wants to jump in, if one of you wants to jump in, you can go ahead.
I could start real quick. I'll tell you, like the first ever campaign is going to sound a little corny, but it was actually from middle school's school office, right? And that was the first ever campaign I ever worked on. But in terms of actual campaigning, it was actually volunteering with the Albany County Democratic Committee about 20 plus years ago. And that I would tell anybody, like that would be the first core part of getting involved in the campaign, just volunteering and finding whatever, way you can help a campaign. Now, certainly at the local level, you can get much more involved. You can actually have interaction with the candidate, but anything like that, I would say would be the start to do it. And that's what I did myself.
Excellent.
And Joan, I could go next if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So, and kind of what I was talking about before about how I started, knocking doors, volunteer work, phone banking, knocking. Every campaign needs your help. Like they need you more than you need them. And that's the really exciting thing. But go into it knowing you need them, because once you get your foot in the door, that will propel you to higher positions. The first advice I would give is look at your local races. And local, by the way, can be a congressional seat. But, you're the voter of a congressional seat, even though that member of Congress goes to DC, they have to go home and get the support of your district. So look at the congressional member, your state senator, assembly member, and either if the incumbent is someone that you believe in, then go to them on their reelect, or if there's someone that you don't believe in, see who announces against them, and they'll have a website and a form that you can fill out. And it'd be pretty difficult not to get in contact with the campaign manager or volunteer coordinator, because they'll be looking for you. And I think my piece of advice, and this is really hard to say sometimes because things are so expensive, and obviously we all want to make a living doing what we love. Early on, first campaign, maybe the second one, it is not going to be the most lucrative thing. You will probably have to volunteer your time like internships and not make money off of it. But as you can see from some of the folks here we have on the call, you can make money doing it eventually. And it's not about making money, but it's about making a living while doing what you love. But just be ready. If you want to be successful and get your foot in the door, be willing to put a lot of time and energy without getting a immediate kind of payment for that. But the payment will be, you'll get experience, number one, resume builder. If you don't end up liking it, you'll go and try something else and have that to get the job. But if you love it, people will take notice of your hard work, and that will propel you into doing a position in this field that will eventually get the paycheck to you. So that would be my advice, is just look to which candidate speaks to you and reach out, because they're looking for people like you to help out.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Excellent. Molly or Jake, anything to add? Otherwise, we can move on to another.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a bobblehead just nodding at Tanner and everything he's saying. It's very funny, but I would say I had a really similar experience, and I would also really recommend starting at the local level. It's what I did, my county executive race in 2017. My story is really just, and I think a lot of people's stories in campaigning is just about timing and opportunity. I had my congresswoman visiting my high school to get a tour of our new Fab Lab that we just opened up that year. And I was the student giving her the tour. And I said, hey, I'm really interested in politics and I want to get involved. Can I intern in your office? And she said yes. And it was funny because it was just at the end of the school year. And so they had all the college kids coming down for the summer to intern in the office. So they said, okay, you can't intern for us in the summer because we're going to give preference to the college students, but we have a campaign for you. And so I got on this campaign, absolutely fell in love with it. And, you do the hard work in the beginning, knocking doors and phone calls. And now I'm a fundraiser, but I will tell you something you need to know is that, when you start sending the kids back to school and you're picking out Halloween costumes, everybody is a field staffer, everybody's knocking on doors and making phone calls, and that's never going to go away. And I definitely echo Tanner's sentiment about do the hard work and don't expect a lot in return financially, but the experience will really be something that resonates with you for your whole career, whether you stay in campaigning or not. Save your money, especially because I would say the most challenging part of campaigning is in 2 weeks or so, I'm not going to have a job, but I'll be able to land quickly, luckily, because finance staff gets hired very early. I started on this campaign back in February of 23. But definitely, like, if you have your foot in the door at a campaign, like Tanner said, they're going to want your help. There's a lower barrier to entry in campaigning because we need volunteers and we need people like you who care about your community to get involved. Take on the extra work, go outside of your department, go outside of your role, because campaigning really is a meritocracy where you will be rewarded for your hard work. And just know that, like, you will be rewarded, like Tanner said, in the experience of it all. I mean, if there's something in government that you really want to see, or if there's something in government that frustrates you, everything that happens in government stems from an election. So I'd say that's the most rewarding part of my career, is being able to influence government through a very direct way.
I'll just pop in quickly. I actually don't have a positive first interaction with politics. So as much as I wanted to get into politics, there was a state Senate candidate that was looking to run, and the individual was not actually going to be the pick of the party as they were kind of going through the process, but she was supported by all of the labor unions. So I volunteered to go knock on doors and help out. I think I was 16 at the time. and we were all supposed to show up at a coffee shop. About 40 minutes of still waiting at the coffee shop. No one showed up for the canvas. And I couldn't figure out where the campaign manager was, where was the candidate, where was anybody supposed to be. So I finally got in touch with the campaign manager after several calls. Oh, we canceled that because there wasn't enough interest tonight. We'll let you know when we do another one. A couple weeks went by, they didn't do another one, called out to the campaign manager again. Oh yeah, we're going to try to get another one set in your area. We'll let you know. Needless to say, that campaign sputtered out and did not get too much further past the petitioning process. But my father said, did you learn something here? Do you think you could have organized this better? How would you do it better? So I took that lesson with me when I went to UAlbany, and believe it or not, for all of you sitting in UAlbany right now, the College Democrats didn't exist when we showed up on campus that year. The club had gone defunct in the previous couple of years. So a friend of mine and I restarted the chapter of College Dems. That fall, we reached out to the Albany County Democratic Party and said, we want to help, we want to volunteer. And of course, they loaded us up with as much literature and signs as possible and said, go do the work, right? So that was kind of my big piece of where it was being in a total failure campaign and then having the local party be, smiling ear to ear to have a bunch of 18-year-olds show up and have energy and want to walk and knock doors.
Excellent. Jake, I'm going to actually start you with the next question. Cassandra asked in the chat, can you describe what a typical day is like? And my guess is the answer is there is no typical day, but tell us a little bit about what some of the days are like.
Yeah, there's never a typical day. I can tell you, I always think the next campaign season is going to be easier. The next campaign season is going to flow a little bit better. This was supposed to be a very quiet year for me. I think this was supposed to be a little bit of a quiet year for Joe Bonilla in terms of some campaigns, and then the world changed because different candidates want to run, they want to get involved. I feel like it's part psychiatrist, part problem solver, part dispenser of Advil for every headache that seems to be going on in the world of politics. But I also like to tell myself and the candidates that we live in such a fast-paced world. Whatever's happening today will be long forgotten in 2 weeks from now. It's probably more like a week from now. So there's never a problem that is the end of the day. But the biggest piece is communication. I can't tell you how long my call list can get in any given day on a problem that's going on. But returning those calls and getting back to people generally solves that issue, or at least gets some progress toward those issues. So I think it's a lot of listening and a lot of talking. I remember when I first got into this, and I was 22, 23. And I had a older party leader say to me, it's all about phone time. You got to work the phones, got to work the phones. And I used to laugh and be like, yeah, you got to work the phones. Okay, great. No, it is all about phone time. Like, you spend more of your time on the phones, talking through issues than anything else. So that's kind of a typical day, I think.
Excellent. And one of the other panelists want to tell us about their typical or atypical days?
I'm just waiting for Molly to talk about call time.
Oh. I mean, I'm happy to, but you go ahead.
All right, I'll go first, Molly. So yes, the chairman is correct, by the way. There are no typical days, but let me tell you some of the things that you would be doing if there were. So if you decide, let's say you're the communications director for a specific campaign, every morning, and hopefully you're an early riser. It helps to be. Or you could be a really, really late night owl, but really it helps to be an early riser. You read the news. You just get the clips in the morning. Now, typically, hopefully, if it's being done correctly, you'll get the clips sent to you. What clips would be is just every story in the state of New York, but then certain issues, and then also certain regions that are impacted by certain issues. You read the news, gather that. You unfortunately spend some time on the opponent's social media, and you also look at their latest press releases, see what they're saying, and then you start saying, okay, what can we talk about today that can get our message out to the voters? Because if a certain issue is hot, let's say the big conversation of the day is gas prices, and you want to talk about something else, let's talk about healthcare today. Well, the press aren't talking about healthcare. The press is talking about how gas prices, let's say, shot up $1 per gallon over the past month. That's what they're writing about. If you want your candidate to speak on it and get their message on what they would do to fix it out, that's what we're talking about today. You can't talk about something that the media is not writing. So that's kind of a piece of it, because there's paid media and unpaid media. So that's one thing, learning the news cycle. The other thing is writing press releases, writing social media posts. That's something I'm assuming most of your students, Joan, are young in age, or at least social media proficient. that is certainly something. We're already kind of past the point. There was a point where I was first getting in where they're like, oh, this is the future. We're there. This is the future. Like mail is still very effective, sending mail pieces to voters' homes. But right now, digital and social media is a massive way. We're way beyond it's the future. It is here. It's a massive way to communicate. So writing social media posts, creating content, and then there's the fun stuff like briefing or debate prepping or interview prepping a candidate. So this is one-on-one with the candidate, getting to work with who's running for the office, kind of helping them, because the best way to do it is find out where they're at. It's their voice, their values. You're just telling them the best way to communicate that, because being passionate is step one, knowing how to effectively communicate step two, and that's where campaign staff comes in. So those are some of the duties that I would do on a day-to-day basis as a communications director. But again, I'm not doing all of that every day, and some days I'm not doing any of it. So those are some of the tasks, but yeah, there really isn't a typical day. It's a dynamic field for sure.
Excellent. Before we move on to one of the other presenters, I just want to introduce Tyler Johnson hopped in. Tyler, if you can turn your camera on, we'll spotlight you. Tyler, actually, for those who don't know, is actually a student in our class right now. He and one other student in our class are actually working on the Harris Biden campaign and traveling around the country. So they are watching the recordings of our class most of the weeks because they're not able to join us. But Tyler, the question they're answering right now, if you can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role in the campaign. And they're talking about a typical day. And I know there isn't a typical day, but tell us a little bit about the types of things you're doing on the campaign right now.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Great. So my name is Tyler Johnson. I'm currently working on the advance team for the Harris Wallace campaign. So basically what that means is anywhere between 4 and 7 days in advance of a rally, a fundraiser, or any type of political event, we're sent out to wherever the event's going to be. So I'm right now in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's very pretty here, very warm. So Governor Walz is coming here on Thursday to do a rally. So basically we got here yesterday, and today we've just been driving all around town trying to find locations that may be best suited for like a 2,000 person rally. These are directives that were given from our headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware. So they're saying we want a 2,000 person rally, probably outdoors. So we're looking at outdoor amphitheaters, showing up, talking with the owners of these places, taking photos, and then kind of building a diagram deck that we then present to our partners at headquarters. And then whenever we're advancing the vice president, we work directly with the White House Office of Scheduling Advance and all of her senior staff to make sure that we're hitting all the points they need to hit, not just from a campaign perspective, but also like a political perspective, and making sure that press coverage is good and like everything that needs to fall in line falls in line. So I'm typically on the crowd team as a crowd lead. So I'm in charge of making sure that guests have a good experience from the time they get there to the time they leave. And that can involve handling all the VIPs, working in the photo line, introducing the guests to whichever principal we're advancing, whether it's the president, the vice president, Governor Walz, Mrs. Walz, the first lady, or any surrogates that we have come out. So this trip is actually interesting because we're looking to have some sort of like talent. So James Taylor may be coming to perform at this one. And, you know, we're hoping for some larger ones towards the end there. But we have 15 days left until the end of the election. So basically we're just hitting the ground running and traveling everywhere until then. There's many advance teams on the ground at a time. So Annabelle, the other student in this class, is actually in Houston, Texas right now, getting ready for a rally that's happening there. They're looking for like 50 to 70,000 people at that one. So they vary in size from really small to really large. And it's a lot of fun. It's really tiring. I have not been home since the 4th of July, but it's really fun and really rewarding.
Excellent. Molly or Joe, do you want to field this question as well?
Sure. So my day-to-day is different on this campaign than others that I've been on. This is the first time that I'm working for an incumbent. I've always done challenger races, but now working for someone who's serving the United States Senate, it's a little interesting because they have to manage both jobs of being a senator and being a candidate for Senate. So I spent most of the cycle up until this month in DC, senators in DC for about 3 days of the week. So it makes most sense for me to be there with her. So the typical day is starting out, usually we have call time Tuesday through Thursday. So I prep a binder of calls for her and, train her on what she's going to say to each donor, depending on what their issue area is or what their professional background is. And so I prep those calls for her. I staff her while she's making the calls, and then I follow up with the donors to chase their money in. I'm very persistent and annoying in people's inboxes, but that's what I have to do. And then the other part of my job is like more front facing, going to actual fundraising events. This cycle, typically on other cycles, I would do in-home fundraisers with like large individual donors. And a lot of my job this cycle was to do PAC fundraising. So that was a little different. Most PACs will only really give to incumbent members. So this time was a little bit different. Again, doing like issue-based fundraisers, which was a different thing. And then in other races, I've done national travel. So like going to donors in their homes and fundraising city to city. So that was really exciting as well. But a lot of it, something that I really like about fundraising is I think it uses both halves of my brain. Like I have to do a lot of the research into donors and in spreadsheets and crunching numbers. And then the other half of it is forward facing, actually talking to people. And that's really exciting. I focus on the high dollar giving, which is interesting this cycle. Like Tanner was talking about how digital is not just the future, it's now. And that is very true. But I will say that like digital fundraising, you're gonna see more digital fundraising on like both opposites of the ideological spectrum. So people like my boss, who is bipartisan, doesn't really end up on TV for doing anything too crazy, is not going to like solicit a lot of digital support. And especially now, like we're kind of like a victim of our own success in that she's polling really, really well against her candidate in a state where she's probably just going to win by 1 point. But because everybody thinks that she's so safe, they're not giving online as much as they would to like Sherrod Brown or John Tester. So we have a lot to make up for on the high dollar end. And so that's why my job is like really crazy at the end of the election right now. And of course, the day-to-day here is trying to avoid a sunburn.
Excellent. Joe, anything to add about your?
Absolutely. And I want to echo with what Tanner said, because I mean, a lot of what we do at our firm is what in-house communications for a campaign does. But the only difference is that we're also developing creative, whether it's video ads, radio ads for, whatever candidate, developing the message, developing the story, and every day it pivots. So if we have a campaign that's one of our clients, we're looking at what's happening in the news cycle. We're looking at what's happening in the candidate's life. We're looking at every aspect. It's a dynamic environment. And so there's a lot of pivoting that happens throughout the day. But generally, we're on the phone with a candidate. We're trying to advise them on best strategies every day. And like I said, everything can be thrown at you in one day. No 2 days are the same, and so I can tell you that, and Jake knows that. Where you think that you have a campaign client that's going to just be easy breezy, and then it takes up your entire day, and then you still have other clients to deal with. So I would say, if anything, one lesson to learn is effective time management and trying to figure out what are the priorities of the day. Because if you can't figure that out, it gets very hard for when clients are trying to get a hold of you, whether they're a candidate, whether they're a campaign manager, or a communications director, a field director, and they're looking for different materials from you. And if you don't have everything together, that's going to be a big problem. So time management's key, but I would say that's like a day-to-day. There's no 2 days are the same there.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there other questions that people have, either from the Zoom students or in the room? All right, come on up.
So obviously something we deal with in this line of work, whether it's an official capacity or campaign capacity, is turnover. I mean, whether your candidate wins, loses, gets ousted out, or stays in as an incumbent. How do you kind of navigate that as working on a campaign?
I'm going to let Molly take that first, because she probably has the most ups and downs from that in her role.
I really don't know where to begin with answering this, actually. So wait, can you clarify, are you talking about like our personal turnover with our careers, or are you talking about like keeping keeping staffers in the industry?
Like going from candidate to candidate.
Your turnover, you're going from candidate to candidate.
Oh, yeah, okay, you're right. I do have a lot of experience with this.
Well, you're the most involved in that.
Yeah. So, like I said in the beginning, I think one of the more challenging parts of campaigning as a career is knowing that after election day, you will not have a job. I think like it's really important to continuously network. I mean, my whole job is networking, so it's really not that hard for me, but you have to put yourself out there and make friends and be helpful to people. So that you can find a job more easily. I will say that being in fundraising, you are like the first hired. I was only the second finance staffer on my team, and at that point we had like less than 10 staffers on the campaign, and now we're obviously a very large operation. So I would also recommend like going into those professional development programs. I know I'm really sorry I can't help you if you're a Republican, but on the Democratic side, there are a lot of organizations that are geared towards making sure people can have a living during the off year and on, the off season of the election. So if you check out like Arena Academy, they're really helpful, or Blue Line Fellows. I would recommend, you know, reaching out to the campaigns. Like I even got some jobs just doing info@campaign.com. You could do it that way. It's also who you know too. I think a large part of it is not just what you know, it's also who you know. Like I was able to get this job because my old boss on Beto's campaign was friends with my boss on Rosen's campaign. So definitely like I said before, go outside of your department and be helpful to people and do things outside of your job description, because people will remember that and remember you as a hard worker, and they will want to help you when the cycle is over. But I would also recommend like going to mission aligned organizations. Like you can go into the nonprofit space. I've also like considered going into university fundraising, or there are other ways that you can get involved on the off cycle, but I can't be that helpful. I feel bad because I get hired pretty early on in the cycle. Like if you're going into field organizing, you're not going to be hired until much later. So, I mean, like find something that you're passionate about and something you can do. I know a lot of people like they bartend between elections. That's just like the reality of it. But I would say like there's always nothing wrong with like going through your network and trying to like get landed that way. That's really the best I could tell you.
Thank you. Any of the other panelists have anything to kind of add on that?
I can start with, as well. So for what we do, I mean, there's always another campaign cycle, and right now we have a focus point for 2025 and 2026 in terms of candidates we work with. So there's always a cycle of different things. And I would echo what Molly said. I mean, networking and really just trying to get a sense of who might be running for what, or who might be running a campaign, whether it's somebody might be a campaign manager or a field director or whatever they might be, because at least in our line of work, in terms of communications and media buying and creative services for a campaign, that's really our bread and butter, where we have to be able to develop those relationships to get contracts. So there's always a cycle. I would say also for folks who are for campaign staffers, firms like ourselves would hire them full time, year round, because there's always something for them to do, whether it's a candidate based campaign or it's an independent expenditure campaign for an issue, whether it's like out in California with like propositions, or even in New York State with the various proposals on the Constitution. There's always an effort there that we need. So there's always cycles that you have to work on from that. So, but I would say networking would be key as part of that.
And if I could just add, Joan, there's also another aspect to this. These are candidates running for elected office, and elected office, there's a lot of positions in government. Now, I know the student that asked the question also kind of implied that your candidate can lose. However, if you do a really, really good job, networking is number one. But then part of networking is also you did a really good job, because you could have network connections And I've seen it from both sides of it. Now that I was a networker, now I'm kind of networked a little bit. It's kind of cool, but you know who you would vouch for and who you wouldn't. Like, yes, I'm going to vouch for this person to get a position because they were really, really good. But I hate to say it, if you didn't do a great job, networking is going to do no good because, you know, why would the networker recommend you if they thought there was someone better for the position? But going off of that, whether or not your candidate loses or not, right now there's two major political parties in America and in New York, obviously. There are one campaign is not an asylum. So if you do a really good job on a losing campaign, there are other candidates from the same party that won. And if you did a really good job and you would be an asset to the party, we have obviously our Democratic chairperson here. I work for the Republicans. Both parties could attest to this, that if you are a talented staffer, either for a campaign or on the governmental side, you will find your way into the position if you did a really good job. So if you're on a winning campaign and you want to apply to their office on the government side, great. And if you did a good job, the candidate will be more than happy to have you on their governmental staff. But even if they lose and you did a great job, there's so many campaigns and campaign managers that are connected across the state, across the country. The main part is you will find a home if you network and do a great job. So that would be my main advice: is campaigns are not in a silo.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that many people work on a campaign to get a job in the government, and many people work on campaigns because campaigns is their career. And that's, you know, very different. And of course, Jake and Joe are in different roles in the Albany County Democratic Party role or in a consulting firm role. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved, and depending upon that, how it flows in your career is going to look very different. So anything else to add? Go ahead, Jake.
If I could just jump in really quickly. One of the things Molly said, and I think Tanner just kind of hit on it too, something folks have gotten really good at is when they're leaving a campaign, they may be kind of starting either their own little company or starting to join somebody else's, but they've gotten really good at sending cold calls and emails. So it sounds like, hey, we met at such and such event. We may not have met at such and such event, but we may have all been in the same room. So I can't tell you, I get probably 2 to 5 of these a week of people trying to pitch us on business for texting, calling, digital. And I take them. I'll respond to some of the emails, and I've gotten some great consultants out of it. But one of the biggest pieces is there aren't actually enough people around to do this locally all the time, because people will jump from campaign to campaign. You'll get sent to Nevada, you'll go to Texas, you might come back to New York. So we don't have people to recommend, especially in a place where there's multi-candidate primaries, right? So if you're in a place in New York where there's multi-candidate primaries, we might have 3 or 4 consultants we work with, but we have 6 or 7 candidates. So you start to run out of people you recommend. So there's always an opportunity, I think, in this business. But I would encourage all of you to get very good at writing those emails so that they're very hard for me to decipher as to whether or not I met you at the fundraiser last week, right?
That's great. I love it. I actually want to introduce Annabelle just popped in. Annabelle, if you can turn your camera on, I'll spotlight you. Annabelle is the other student from our class who is working on the Harris Walls campaign. And if you want to just introduce yourself, we've been dealing with a number of other questions, but why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what your role is on the campaign, what types of things you've been doing for the last few months with the campaign.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Annabelle. I'm a senior at UAlbany, and I don't know if Tyler went already, but we're on the same team. So we're on the advanced team, and most of the stuff that I do on the advanced team is centered around crowd work and crowd control for the different campaign events that either the vice president or Governor Walz or a different principal has in a different state. So Tyler and I have been traveling around, and it's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other questions from the students? All right, come on up.
My question is a little less on the career side. I wanted to ask Molly specifically if working in campaign finance had changed her views or affected her views on campaign finance and regulation as a whole.
This is a great question. Okay. So yeah, our campaign finance system is terribly, terribly broken. We have a situation since Citizens United where outside groups can influence our elections in sums that are unlimited and growing exponentially every year. I think that's honestly a large part in why I work in fundraising. I have a job in fundraising because money is so important in elections now. And I think that you have these groups that are driving up the cost of elections. It's also just television advertising is extremely expensive. I think between 1952, when television advertising was introduced into campaigning at the presidential level, and like 92, when Bill Clinton was elected, the cost of campaigning had tripled across the board, across parties. And now I don't even know what it is now at this point. I'm sure it's like 5 times the amount. But I think part of why I'm motivated to work in finance and fundraising is to make sure that, the candidates that I believe in have the resources to be able to win and defend themselves on air against, attacks that I think are really unfair across the board. When you are dealing with a super PAC, for example, that's known as like an independent expenditure only committee. And so they are not allowed to coordinate with the campaign. So for example, like Future Forward, that's, spending for Kamala Harris, they're not allowed to coordinate with the Harris campaign. I think it's a problem because, you want your message to be disciplined. We've been talking about like communications. We as campaigns, we want to tell a story, but it's not even just talking about our policy positions. It's telling a story where the voter can see themselves in that story, and it's a story that reflects their values and the things that they care about. And so you can't really count on that when you have an outside group spending for you. So yeah, I think like we need to end Citizens United. I really have only worked for candidates that are opposed to Citizens United, but I would like caution people to kind of separate in your mind the super PACs versus actual PACs. I am fine with PAC money. I think if you're gonna like disavow or just reject all PAC money, I think you really hurt yourself in a way that's unnecessary. And not all PACs are like, I think PACs get a bad name because of Citizens United, but PACs are very different than super PACs. And I don't know. I have a job because of the way that the campaign finance system is set up. And I think most fundraisers are against the system as it is because we have to raise more and more cycle after cycle to be able to compete with outside money.
Excellent. Any of the other candidates, any thoughts on campaign finance? Or any of the other panelists, any other thoughts on campaign finance?
I have a couple of thoughts real quick, and it more relates to things here in New York State. So a number of years ago, New York City put together a plan, to kind of address this, in terms of matching funds for candidates. So therefore, candidates can go back to actually just doing campaign versus fundraising. And then on the same side, the state did the same thing. Now, I might be the only consultant to say this, but, the challenge with this system where there's so much money just pouring in is that the goal is obviously to level the playing field. For a candidate, let's say a candidate's labor organizer just trying to get their work, get the word out about their campaign. But a lot of those funds don't go to necessarily campaign workers. They go to folks like myself, where it's for television ads, it's for creative, it's all things of that nature. So really, we've talked so much about money in politics in terms of PAC money or super PAC money, but there is a challenge in terms of money out in politics about where it's being spent. And really, at the end of the day, you have a lot of these firms, not necessarily our firm, but others that they're being paid for the campaign ads. And then the following cycle, then they're lobbying the same candidates that they're working with. So there is a challenge there, I think, that has not been addressed, but that's something that we have to work on in this state.
I would just watch out working for candidates or PACs. I mean, all of the expenditures are public on the FEC website. If you're seeing that all of their campaign expenditures are going to consultants, I would just, question everything and kind of ask yourself, like, is this candidate running because they have a shot at the office, or are they running because they were recruited by like industry leaders that want to make money off of them? Because some candidates, they get into politics because they really want to make a change in their community, and they have absolutely no shot at winning because the district is unwinnable. And it's unfortunate because it funnels a lot of money away from, swing districts that really matter into seats where it's really just like a money-making endeavor, and that sucks to say. And I mean, I'm not going to say this about every candidate. Like I worked for a Democrat running for governor in Texas, so I'm not going to tell you don't work on hard races that appear unwinnable, but just be wary for some of these candidates. I mean, I don't think running in an unwinnable seat automatically makes you a grifter, but I mean, just question it,
Excellent. Any other questions from the students, either on Zoom or in the room? So we're edging up on the end of our hour. So maybe what we can do is have each of the panelists just share any last thoughts you have about, advice to students who might want to get into either short-term or long-term into this field, into campaigning. Any advice just in general, or any last thoughts, things you wanted to be sure to say tonight that you didn't get a chance to. So, and then whoever wants to go first can jump in.
I have to run really soon, so I can jump in.
Okay.
I would say, honestly, it's like, I know you hear it like every day, but definitely network, because that's how I got into the position that I was in now. Through the semester in Washington program that UAlbany has, that the amazing Joan Marceau helps lead. I got my internship in DC and was there last January to May, and then met people that worked on the, at the time, Biden-Harris campaign, who did this type of work and then got me into doing the same thing. So just definitely make sure that you're connecting with people and leaving lasting connections and making really good first impressions. And as Molly was saying, it's really about who you know, but it's also about who knows you. Even if you don't know that they know you, people that you're working around can just tell people like you're doing a good job, and then people just start reaching out and say, hey, I know so-and-so works with you, and they said that you've been really good at this. Would you be interested in trying this out? So just always put your best foot forward and make sure that you're making connection with everybody that you need, especially in a city like DC, if you're going into politics and want to move there.
All right. Thanks so much, Tyler. We appreciate you taking time to join us tonight. Annabelle, do you want to go next? Because you probably also have to run.
Sure, I can go next. Kind of to Tyler's point too, just work hard and be yourself, and I think that gets you far. I think a lot of it is just kind of making friends as you go, and just learning about what people have done and what interests you, and you'll meet the right people at the right time, and that's the best advice I can give.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Have fun. All right. Who wants to go next?
I think something that I want to say too, and this is really important to know too. And this is not really to talk about what Molly was saying about unwinnable seats, but sometimes because there's so many and you'll really dive headfirst on a lot of stuff, don't get demoralized if you're on a bad campaign. And what I mean by bad is I mean operationally. The candidate might be great, the agenda, the message, the platform, everything, it could be great morally for you, but operationally, logistically, it might be just not the right campaign, meaning the team isn't clicking. There's certain people that are not doing their part to make a successful campaign, but that can actually be just as insightful as being on a really good one. So I've actually had the pleasure of seeing both sides of that. There's been times where I've been on and I'm like, the campaign manager is just brilliant. I've worked under one in particular on the government side, but also one on the political side, press secretary and comms director. I can't say better things about either of them, and I've learned so much. But then also, I've been on campaigns where it's just a ship that's just sinking. But still work and work your butt off and take the lessons away for why it's not working. And I think actually Jake was talking about this too. This is what Jake started with, was I didn't like how this was going. When I'm in that position, I'm going to do it so much better because these were the deficiencies, and now this is how I'm going to make it efficient. So that would be another thing too, is don't put your head down. Also, don't put your head down if your candidate loses. You might have done everything you can, but at the end of the day, it's the voters' say. It's not your say. It's not the 10 people on the team. It's the voters. So if you lose, that doesn't mean necessarily you did a bad job. It means that maybe the margin of loss would have been even wider. And then there's going to be times where you do get the victory. And the last thing I would say is just listen to Joan and do what she says, because she played a part, and I'm sure all of our professional development, but I did semester in DC, and her advice is unmatched, and she played a part into why I'm here today. And it's part of the reason I want to get back and do this. But like, seriously, listen to Joan. If she's nagging you about sending that one more application, just do it. Just do it. She knows what she's talking about. Thanks, Joan.
Thanks, Tanner. I did not pay him to say that, I promise. All right, who wants to go next?
I'll hop in. So if you're interested in doing this, if you want to get involved, I think you're going to have a lot of opportunities to get involved. One of the things we do have now is an endless campaign calendar. So even though this election day is still, what are we, less than 3 weeks out. Actually early voting. Yes, we've got early voting starting this weekend. So really the election day starts on Saturday here in New York. And it has started elsewhere in the country, but we're only probably 110 to 120 days out from an endorsement in a race for mayor of the city of Albany. So in the city, most of you will be in next year if you're not going to Washington, D.C. There's going to be an active campaign already with at least 3 to 5 candidates running for mayor of Albany. So if you want to get involved, you want to volunteer, you want to be part of a campaign, now might be the time to start looking into it and starting to get invested in it.
Excellent. Thank you. Go ahead, Molly.
Well, first of all, once again, I will say everything that Tanner said is correct, including listening to Joan. I think that if campaigning is something you want to do, even for a cycle or your career in general, if you're willing to move, there will always be a job for you. Of course, there's things at the local level. If you're in the New York City area, there's going to be a mayoral race coming up. There's already a candidate running against Eric Adams, so that's exciting. Need that. I think we can all agree. But there will always be a job for you. And I know I was saying before that if you're a field organizer, you're not really going to get hired until the end of the cycle. It's actually not true on the Democratic side. I think a lot of the state parties, I know Wisconsin, I think maybe Florida and Michigan are all like turning into a year-round organizing model. So there will be jobs out there for you because the Democrats just have too much money and don't know what to do with it. So like we're putting money in Idaho. I don't know what's going on. But I would say work really hard. Always be yourself, like everyone said. Go outside of your department, help people out, be friendly. And loyalty really matters. I mean, stick through at the end, take care of yourself so that you're not a month out of election day, burnt out and unable to do your job. Like campaigns are really a marathon. And so just keep that in mind. And then always just remember, there's always going to be another election. So, I mean, I got on my first campaign in 2017. We won, and the energy from that winning that race has like kept me going throughout every cycle of losses since. I'm not even joking. Hopefully Nevada will be good to us this year, and I think it will, but just keep in mind that like I think a lot of people, they burn out of the industry, and if you want to make this into a career, you need to take care of yourself and also like just put your professional interest in mind. Don't be the person that quits like a month before the election.
Excellent.
And always have fun, because it is campaigning is supposed to be fun. And if you're not having fun, go find something else to do.
It's good advice about anything. Go ahead, Joe.
Sure, and I get that. It was a perfect segue because there's obviously if you're interested in working on campaign is great, but there is a life after a campaign, and all the same skill sets, whether it's for field, it's for finance, it's for communications, volunteer recruitment, advance, can be applied to what we do, because we also do work in the corporate, institutional, nonprofit world as well. So we always look for folks who have worked on campaigns, who have been CMs or field directors or worked in finance, because, if we have a corporate client or nonprofit client or institutional client who's trying to work on a particular initiative, whether it's something involving the legislature or it's something involving their institution, those same skills can apply in that world as well. So, even if you're a volunteer for a campaign, if you're paid staff or whatever from there, those skills can translate to a career. And you have some folks who, live and breathe campaigns, and that's all they've done for their entire careers. But at some point, you may want to pivot to something what I do, where you're still working with campaigns, but you're working with others who are still trying to advance their message or advance their cause. So there's always that level of a future as well. So always consider that as well.
Excellent. All right. I think everyone had their little last words. So thank you so much to our panelists. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules, and some here crazy. The election is 3 weeks away schedule. Jim? That's an excellent question. We have a question if it's okay if I share your LinkedIn contact information, and then they can connect with you that way. So I got nods from everybody. So we'll do that. We'll share that with you after the class. So thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks to everyone who joined us, those who aren't in the class, as well as those of you in the class. We'll wrap up this. And I'm going to end the recording for those who are in the class. Just log back in a couple of minutes. We'll take about a 5-10 minute break, and then we'll start back up again at, let's say, 7:15. So